Hello and welcome to Vibrant Lives podcast, formerly Amanda's Wellbeing podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to health and well-being, featuring interviews with experts in the fields of nutrition, physical and mental health, and my 5-minute food facts series. I'm Amanda Hayes, your host. I'm a lawyer turned nutritionist with a deep curiosity about living a healthy, active, and fulfilling life, which I would call a vibrant life, and sharing what I learn with you here on this podcast. Before I introduce today's guest, I'll briefly note that although I will often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided in Vibrant Lives podcast is not intended to be used to treat any medical conditions, and it's never a substitute for advice from your own health professionals. Today I'm here with Kristin Lewis, former Australian road cycling champion. Kristin's love for cycling has propelled him towards a career in health and fitness. He owns 3 gyms, Life personal trainers, with his wife Tanya, and he has recently opened an indoor spin studio called Echelon Cycling Studio. In today's discussion, we'll talk about fitness in general, cycling, and what is unique about Echelon Studio, including how it can assist cyclists of all levels, from elite cyclists to absolute beginners. We'll also touch on one of Kristin's life skills about which he is quite passionate, and that is routines. Kristin is a delightful and kind human, and I enjoyed his company and trust that you will too. Hi Kristin, it's great to have you here today at Vibrant Lives podcast. So Kristin, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
So I'm definitely an Adelaide boy. My parents, my dad was from here. My mum is Malaysian, so she was from Kuala Lumpur and came to Adelaide for uni, and that's how I ended up in Adelaide.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So do you have any contact with your Malaysian side of the family?
I do. I haven't been over there for a while.
Yeah.
It's probably since we started having children.
Right.
But the plan is to get back there at some point with the kids. So,
brilliant.
Yeah.
And Kristin, how did you develop an interest in cycling?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I probably, I reckon mountain bike riding was becoming a thing when I was in my early teens, and I grew up in Belair, and so used to ride my bike through Belair National Park for fun, and then at high school I went on a high school camp, and as I think it was year 8 or year 9, and my year 11 camp leader, who was one of the other students there, he actually raced mountain bikes, and
Right.
so I didn't even know you could. So talking to him and finding out about it, I sort of thought that I might like to do something like that.
Yeah.
And I'd always sort of had some success in like aerobic sports like running and things. So I ended up entering my first mountain bike race, which I won. And so, thereafter, it seemed like a good thing to keep doing. So, started off in mountain bike riding and then moved into the road, a few years later.
And why did you make that transition to the road? Why didn't you just stick with the mountain bikes?
So mountain biking back then, I reckon, it still wasn't a very professional sport. But what I did notice was any of the guys who were good mountain bikers, they all train on the road as well.
Right.
Just because there's just more consistent, you're on the pedals more consistently, whereas mountain bikes tend to be, you ride up a hill and you're working hard, and then there's lots of downhill and freewheeling. So from a fitness point of view, not as helpful from a training perspective.
Yeah, sure.
So, started riding on the road, and then I guess started racing on the road because, again, that's what some of these mountain bike riders who I aspired to be like were doing. And then when I started looking into that, you then could see that actually there were people who did road cycling as a professional sport, as a career. And I think that's what got me in. I was like, that's what I want to do. So started heading down that path.
So there was a clear pathway, whereas perhaps not for mountain bike riding back then.
That's right. Mountain biking was, I think it was still very much in its infancy, and, it was still, still developing as a sport.
And so you did very well on the road bike. You're a former Australian road cycling champion. So when you were in that phase, Kristin, where did you train and who did you train with?
I guess, living in Adelaide, so I was just training around the Adelaide Hills a lot. I probably got my first leg up, if you like, through meeting a chap called John Murray, So John was a cycling coach. He was a hard taskmaster, but we I think we worked really well together. So I was really hungry to learn, and so he took me under his wing, set my sort of training program. I would always call him after each race and debrief on sort of blow by blow what happened and the decisions I'd made during the race and what perhaps I should have done differently. So he was a real mentor for me over a number of years and really helped me to get established as a road cyclist.
And then from there, were you part of a team or something like that?
Yeah, I was actually trying to think back. So there was numerous teams, I guess. So there wasn't probably the same level of, I guess, amateur teams that there are now. But there were a few. So there was one. I remember Rio Coffee was one of our sponsors at some point, and we had a team with those, and with a North Adelaide cafe called Cafe Pisano at the time.
Oh yes.
A guy called Michele Primaro, who was he sort of ran our team. So there was that component from a local perspective, and then I guess the main thing was to try and make teams which were comprised of both interstate riders and riders from South Australia for the bigger interstate races.
Yeah.
So that was my main aspiration, and obviously to get into our state team and things so that I could compete at like national titles and things like that. So that was sort of the level then, rather than having a really organised national road series team like they do now, which is fantastic. So it was that sort of thing it was coming, but it wasn't quite at the same level that it is at now. And
so that was in the late 1990s, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. Yeah, so I reckon I was a first year senior cyclist in 1996. So,
right. Okay. Yeah. And so at your peak, what would a typical week of training look like?
I can certainly remember because I think it was 1996, my first year as a senior. I know for that year I rode 33,000 kilometres for the year, so it was. I don't think I've ever done anything like that since that time.
It's full on.
It is full on. Yeah, I didn't have much of a life back then. But yeah, just lots of kilometres. I think just to try and bridge that the difference in racing distance from being a junior to a senior.
Right.
And then I particularly remember doing lots of strength type efforts, which is where you ride up hills like Norton Summit in a really big gear. So I remember I can remember doing some blocks of those where I'd have to do 3 of those on a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday. So I must have been fit back then.
Oh, I'm sure you were. Sounds like it. Did you do any cross training?
Very little. I dabbled a little bit in the gym, just with some of the exercises that my coach had asked me to do. But predominantly it was on the bike, on the road. I did do a little bit on the track and on rollers probably more from a technique and speed perspective.
Right.
But I definitely did that under sufferance. I think road was where my, heart was.
Yeah, where you wanted to be.
Yes.
Apart from your wife, and we'll mention her later because I believe she was also a cyclist, what did cycling bring to your life?
I think for me, I've always been a pretty goal-focused and structured person. So for me, and I'd always been involved in sport and pretty worked out from a young age that I had reasonable aerobic capacity. So I think, probably also a reasonably competitive person in some respects. So I think for me, it gave me the opportunity to compete, which I really, really appreciated. Once we got into the team side of things, I loved the team component of cycling and the tactics, and particularly when there was definitely very much a South Australia versus the rest of the states thing going on, and we were generally the underdog and generally underpowered, but every now and then we did manage to have some success, which was really good. So I think for me that was the main part, was just I really enjoyed like the physical training and the racing and that went along with it, and the structure from the sound of it as well, and the camaraderie of the other riders. So your wife Tanya, who I said was also a cyclist, and you now have 4 daughters. Now, have any of them showed an interest in cycling, or are they a bit young still? They're probably a bit young. I mean, our eldest is Frankie. She's interested in nearly everything. So they're all doing athletics at the moment. But we've certainly, I think we've got 3 of them are on bikes, and so we make our way around the Adelaide Parklands loop. There's about a 25 or 20k loop that you can do around town, so that's sort of fun. But our littlest one, who's almost 4, she still sits in the front bucket of a cargo bike that my wife rides. So her dream is to be able to ride by there by herself.
Yeah, so to join in the others.
She can't be too far away.
Yeah, I guess her legs are little.
They are, yes. Yeah.
Be behind everyone else. So you've got 4 daughters, as we just mentioned. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a business owner. So how do you continue to incorporate cycling into your own life?
Yeah, well, I think on a practical level, by getting up really early.
Yeah.
Best thing for me is to be out of the house before anyone else is awake.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm generally on the road or doing a session at a cycling studio sort of just after 5.
Oh, right, really early.
So I generally start work around 7:30. So I ride for around an hour in the mornings during the week, and then sort of home by 6:15, have breakfast with the kids, and then
Perfect.
I'm out the door at 7:15.
Yeah.
So, and I think I'm motivated to do it because I guess these days it's not as much competitive for me, although I like being, I guess, as fit as I can be.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I've just really I really understand both the obvious physical and health benefit, but probably particularly for me now. Riding my bike is probably it's like the quietest time of my day.
Yeah, it's like your meditation.
It is,
something.
yeah. So there's not emails to answer or phone calls or people that need something. So
people saying, Dad.
Yeah. So I think as much as I love all those other parts of my life, it is nice just to have that little bit of peace and quiet, even though you're working hard physically. And I also really enjoy being outdoors. It's always been something which I've valued. So it's probably the main way that I spend time during the week anyway. Outdoors is on my bike. So yeah, that's a big part of it as well.
So in the winter then, it's obviously pretty dark when you're out there. So
yeah, so you need to have good lights.
Yeah, of course.
So but I think for me at that time of the morning, it's not so much being concerned about cars. It's probably more like rocks on the road, like through the hills, but also wildlife. So
yes,
yeah, our sort of groups had issues with kangaroos, with deer, primarily those two.
Yeah.
And so I guess you really have to be focused.
Yeah, you have to have
when you're going downhill, you can't
your wits about you, don't
correct,
you?
Yeah, you can't relax because they move pretty quickly and they're really difficult to see.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's interesting. Who would have thought? So you and your wife Tanya own a successful personal training business, Life PT, and I think you've got 3 locations.
That's
Is
right.
that correct? Yep. So exercise and fitness, as you've clearly alluded to, is a huge part of your life. So let's talk in quite a general sense, I think, about exercise. So at a really basic level, Kristin, why is exercise important and what types of exercise should people do?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's probably a couple of different levels. So I think most people these days are reasonably well educated, and it's easy to to read up and see why exercise is good for you. Mm-hmm. I think the majority of the health promotion that we're exposed to is all around. I guess if you don't exercise, all of these different negative health things will happen to you. And there's obviously a strong proof and relationship with that, and I agree with all of those. So I think on a basic level, it is about health.
Yeah.
Probably the area that I'm really interested in pushing into, that certainly spend a lot of time talking with clients about, is the upside, the other side of it. So rather than saying, if you don't do this, bad things will happen to you, I guess I prefer to think of it as, if you do these, all these good things will happen to you. So certainly for me, that comes from my own personal experience. Mm-hmm. It comes from my training, like doing human movement at university, and just through my experience as a personal trainer and coach. So I think, obviously on a physical level, like, just feeling better, the friendships you meet by spending time with like-minded people. So I'd probably look at my riding group as, that's my pub time, so I'm riding a bike with a bunch of guys rather than at the pub drinking, so it's probably going to be a good thing. I think the other part to it too, though, is that I really believe that exercise has a massive upside in relation to, resilience, mental capacity, and, I think for me, I really believe that I couldn't run as hard as I do in all aspects of my life if I wasn't really, really fit.
Sure.
So I think, that looking at that upside is important. And I think, there's another good example of that would be if you look at, all of the CEOs of large listed companies now. I think that image of a CEO being the guy up in the glass office smoking cigars and drinking scotch is probably long gone. I reckon they're all up early. Their business is a 24/7 situation, and so they're cycling, they're running, they're seeing personal trainers, they're doing yoga because they've realised that becomes a really important tool to help them manage themselves and also then give the best to their business.
Yeah, and it also gives, I think, in terms of the mental health side of it, just gives you perspective.
Definitely.
As well,
yeah,
I
definitely.
think.
You often don't solve your problems out there. Well, sometimes you do, but I think you do get to see them with greater clarity.
Yes.
And see them for what they are, rather than sort of getting caught up in the sort of on the rat wheel, if you like. I think that's really helpful.
In terms of the types of exercise, I mean, I guess the two sort of big types, one is cardiovascular, so getting your heart rate up, and the other is strength-based. So should people do a mix of both?
Yeah, so I think the textbook answer is if you go and see the Australian Guide to to exercise or movement or exercise, it recommends 150 minutes of aerobic exercise, or that could be as little as 75 minutes if the exercise is classified as moderate to vigorous.
Per week, isn't it?
Per week, sorry, yes. And also specifying within that that the other two components are doing strengthening exercises a couple of times a week, and minimising sitting time. So they're the three main recommendations from that. So that really captures it, I guess, on a basic level. And then I think from my perspective, so in our personal training business, we mainly work with clients who would be probably between 35 and 75 years old, but we have clients in their 80s, 90s.
Oh, that's impressive.
It is that they are impressive people to be around. And I think what you realise is that things like mobility become super important as we age. So I've certainly learned a lot from observing these clients and learning from them about the sorts of things that are going to become important as I age. It's definitely strength, mobility, balance are some things that people don't think about as much, but are super important.
And so when you have a client, what is the benefit then of doing a sort of a one-on-one PT session as opposed to a group session? Like what does tailored exercise bring to people? Sure.
So I guess, for different people, it's important for different reasons. So I think, you might have a client who is already someone who exercises a lot and they want to come and see us for something very specific. So that might be for a particular rehab program, or they may already do a lot of cardiovascular work but want some specific strength work. Or we have a lot of, for example, runners who may want to do their running prehab. So that's effectively a whole bunch of exercises to assist them to remain injury-free in their sport. We have other clients who, I guess because they've been on the planet for a few more years than 20, it's just generally been long enough to have a few niggles. Perhaps they're women who have had babies, and so there's implications of that. So generally for them, being in a group environment where you sort of have to go with the majority, you can choose to do your own, but it does tend to detract from the class to some degree. So we find in a one-on-one environment, you can talk to people, you can actually understand what they're about, what they want, what they need, and then tailor it so that what one client would work on could be very different from someone else. So we've got clients who, they'll finish a session and they'll be absolutely destroyed because that's what they're after. They want to be worked really hard, and that's what they're engaging us for. And then we have other clients who would only exercise at, I would describe a moderate pace or gentle pace, because they may have particular injury issues. They may have other things which prevent them from working hard. So I guess in the end for us, our objective is that everyone who walks out the door feels like they've got some value from that, as opposed to, having come in and just done what they could have done by themselves. In that case, they've probably wasted their money. So we aim to obviously add value to what they can do exercise-wise.
Yeah, and I think one of the benefits I've found with having a personal trainer is you might think you're doing something a certain way, but they'll point out something and you think, oh, okay, so I need to like relax my shoulders or whatever it is, something that you can't pick up yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, again, working down the active aging path, because that's really important, I think, for a lot of our clients. It's helping them to develop better what we would call movement quality. So it's not just doing an exercise better, it's doing an exercise better, but that exercise replicates an everyday movement pattern. So if they can do that better, then they're gonna use their body as it was intended, and they're gonna have less pain, or likely to have less pain, less issues in the future, and then they can continue to live active lives and do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. I'm at the age now where I'm watching, my friends, my parents and my friends' parents sort of hit their mid-70s to 80s.
Yes.
And it's when you really notice the ones that have kept themselves fit have a better quality of life, essentially.
Yes, I mean, you need a little bit of luck as well, but I think there's a bunch of things that we can control. I think it's interesting also that we've had a number of those clients who they've probably started because their son or their daughter has sort of gently pushed them in the door, and so they haven't wanted to be there at the start. But now they come, they love being there. They love the people they spend time with, the other clients, and they've got to know everyone and understand what they need to do there, and it's added really real value to their lives.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I think that's certainly how I've found it. And as we said, you already own 3 gyms, and you have recently opened up Echelon Cycling Studio. So why did you want to add to your workload and do that?
Yeah, still working that out, actually. No, I think it's probably been on the it's been something that Tanya and I, my wife, we've talked about probably for the last, I'll say 5 years, but it's probably been 10 years in reality. Right. So it probably started 4 or 5 years ago. We sort of thought, we should do something like this, and we spent a bit of time going and trying and seeing what else was out there around Australia. So we've probably been to half a dozen studios over in Melbourne and also over in Sydney to see what was out there. And there was a real diversity in what people were providing and to different sort of target groups. We talked to a big group over in the States to see what they were doing, and so I guess it just seemed like a logical fit because we both had a fitness background, operating a business, and had experience with that. We'd both come from a cycling and racing background, so that was a passion for both of us. And I guess we sort of felt like, since probably the time that the Tour Down Under came to Adelaide, that Adelaide had developed a real cycling culture, and also that I think in a general sense, cycling had gone from, like when I first started, there was only ever racing cyclists or the guys who, rode to work with panniers on their back wheel. Whereas now I think the largest segment of cyclists are recreational cyclists, some serious, some not so serious. So we believed there was a real market to help those people improve their cycling, whatever that meant to them.
I believe that yours is the first of this kind of studio in South Australia. Is that correct?
Look, it is in the format it's in, and so that a big part of setting this up was actually trying to get our heads around what technology was available. It's a real emerging market at the moment, and is the technology is very, very new. So the bikes that we have, for example, we were one of the first businesses around the globe actually that have had those bikes, and they're from a really well-known equipment supplier. It's been good being first in one sense because we've really had their ear, and they've been they're trying to push into this I guess boutique sort of market in a studio rather than like a big gym set up.
So can you explain to us then the equipment you have, the bikes you have, what they are and how they differ to like a big cycling studio in a gym, for example?
Sure. So I guess the things that we definitely wanted from our bikes were, we know that cyclists are very particular about their equipment typically, and so we didn't want a bike that looked or felt like a spin bike, if you like, in a gym. We wanted a bike that looked and felt and even sounded like a road bike that you would ride. So that was one criteria. I think the other criteria for us is we didn't want to set up where people brought their own bikes in, just because there's just too much messing around,
Yep.
loading, unloading, and most of our clients we envisage will be really busy people. So we wanted bikes that you could take measurements from your road bike, jump on these bikes, set them up really quickly, which these bikes do have the capacity to do. I think everyone who has ridden them as a cyclist agrees that they feel really good. They feel as good as a stationary bike can feel compared with a road bike. And I think the other key part to that is that they're smart bikes, so they have the ability to plug into some web-based interface that we use. So we construct programs on that interface, and then they're delivered through the bike. And there's a couple of different modes of doing that. And without boring you with all the technical jargon, effectively it just enables each user to be at all different levels of fitness.
Yeah.
So you could have effectively the world champion sitting next to someone who was a relatively new cyclist, and we could have them working at a level that was appropriate for them in the session. So while everyone in the class is doing the same style of program, they're all working at a level that's suitable for them because of the technology of these bikes. So.
It's great actually because, as you say, it enables people who have different levels of fitness or power to participate together in the same thing. So I'll just describe it. I did a class this morning. So it's got great metrics. So there's a screen at the front of the room and you can see your watts and your cadence and then you also have your phone in front of you, which has another screen on it. And you can see your heart rate and anyway, lots of metrics there. So that's fun. So you could be doing the same program as the big strong guy next to you, but just at a lower watt setting.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think the other thing that my wife and I laughed about was that we felt it would cater for all the cycling widows out there, be they male or female, so that it was a time when actually they could ride with their partner and they could both ride at their own levels and do something together. So that's true. Hopefully that's helping a few relationships out there.
Yeah, instead of one of them getting cross with the other one for holding them
up.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So talk us through, what does a session look like? If I rolled up to Echelon Cycling Studio, what could I expect?
Yeah, sure. So I think initially the most important piece of information that we want to know is trying to understand each person, like what their cycling background is, if they have any, and I guess what they're hoping to get out of the session. So, where does this training fit with their broader goals?
Yeah.
So some people turn up and they've got some race goals they want to work towards. Other people just want to go up hills faster or improve their power output so they can rival their mates on the weekends. And others are keen to learn a bit more about cycling technique. So I guess one of the advantages of having a coaching team there, and our team are all people who have been cyclists at national and even international level. So they're able to pass on tips to each participant while they're working hard. So I guess that's the most helpful time to have feedback rather than just do it in theory.
Yeah.
So I think for us, getting that background is important. Secondly, ensuring that the person's set up correctly on the bike. So if they have their own bike measurement numbers, we can take those and apply them to the bike. If not, we'll guesstimate that initially, get them set up, and then make adjustments as we go. And then I guess based on all of that and what their goals and current fitness levels are, setting up their FTP, which is their functional threshold power. And that's, I guess, if you like, a measure of their current level of cycling fitness. Yeah. And is what is used to determine what level they'll work at the bikes. And so we'll start with an initial level. The program will start and they can manually override that up or down at any point during the session. If they're perhaps having a really good day or not having a good day, or if we've guesstimated that number incorrectly and they need to make some changes. So that's normally what we would do for someone starting out. We would generally suggest they also start up perhaps at a conservative power level initially, and then perhaps build up over a few sessions to work out what their true training power level is. And then generally that's what they'll stay on and work through the various different sessions that we will set.
Yeah, I've found that really helpful because I have been gradually building up my FTP, but for the last couple of weeks I've deliberately put it down a bit because I've got this race coming up and I don't want to be, I need to do a lot of other training as well.
Yes.
So can you explain to us what the person is going to do in terms of how hard is it going to be? Is it going to be intervals? Is it going to be fast, slow? What's it like?
Yeah, sure. So you definitely you won't be sitting on a bike and just pedaling away at moderate pace. So all of the sessions are designed, I guess, to get people to work at a level which is challenging. So I guess it's not just an indoor alternative to riding outdoors. It's indoor, yes, but that means it's a controlled environment where we can manipulate the different training variables. So effectively you get if you want it, a really hard workout.
Yeah.
So we would sort of see it from an intensity point of view as being probably the peak of someone's exercise week.
Yeah, sure.
So getting them to work at levels that are ultimately unsustainable, but you're not necessarily holding those for a very, very long time. The way the technology works, the bike holds you accountable to the power level that you've inputted when you first started. So, and that goes up and down based on the programs we've set, and the programs we've set are based on percentages of that FTP.
Yeah.
So, I guess what you will experience will be that you'll see different coloured bars up on the screen. So blue is easy, red is hard is probably a very simple way to explain it, but there's a few different grades in between. And so if you're in a blue area and you're pedaling along, it'll feel quite easy. But as soon as your bike hits a red zone, you will feel the load gets a lot harder, which forces you to pedal faster. So it does provide a lot of accountability if people want it. And it is designed to be to provide some real intense training, which I guess is supported by all of the science out there now that I guess supports training harder and using interval style type training rather than just doing lots and lots of, I guess, moderate
constant
kilometres,
slogging away,
which endurance athletes traditionally tend to do. But perhaps science has moved on since that time. And I think the other part for us is that, a lot of endurance athletes are also, they're people that are at the pointy end of their career, they're running businesses, they have young families, and so they always are challenged with time. And I think our vision for Echelon was that it would provide a really time-effective way to train because of the intensity it can help create in a safe environment.
Yeah, you get a lot of bang for your buck. The sessions are 45 minutes. And would you say then it's a form of HIIT, high intensity interval training?
Very much so. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So effectively periods of I won't say rest, I'll say lower intensity with periods of higher intensity. And there's different style sessions, different lengths of effort, and there's different programming rationale and why we would deliver different versions of that. So I think we have a bank of about 80 sessions that we've created, and sort of always creating new versions of that and updated sessions to help people work in different areas of their cycling fitness.
Yeah. So if someone is not a cyclist, could they attend Echelon? Would it benefit them as well? Yeah,
absolutely. I think they'd probably find a few things strange, like people clomping around with shoes with bike plates on. But in all seriousness, absolutely. So a couple of thoughts on that. We actually have another product that I guess is probably aimed to be a bit more like a traditional spin class in a gym. So very originally we've called it spin. And so in those classes, which my wife Tanya takes, they use the bikes in a slightly different way. So there's not quite the same level of accountability of the power changing gears for you effectively. You have control over gears, and those programs are set based on gradient or a series of hills. So definitely the clients we have in those classes tend to be more general fitness clients rather than people who are recreational keen cyclists as such. So
I think it would also be of benefit to people who might be thinking about cycling but are a bit nervous perhaps and just want to get their technique sorted out before they hit the roads.
I think technique and learning what to do in an environment where they feel safe and they don't have to look over their shoulder and worry about getting run over by a car. I think that's a big part of it, and I think there's a lot of people now who are taking up cycling. I'll say later in life, but they're not when they're really young. So they're coming to it later, which is, it's a harder time to acquire skills.
Yeah.
It can definitely still be done. So I think this is an environment where they can learn some of the ways to, I guess, use their bodies on a bike to generate the best outcomes, and I guess to fast track their learning of that.
Yeah.
So then apply on the road.
Yeah, I think it's great that cycling's so popular. It's just such a fun way to spend time with friends. And I always feel when I'm riding in a group that I feel quite safe.
Yes.
Because we're easily seen if there's a bunch of us.
I can still remember, you go to a barbecue 10 years ago and someone would say, what do you do? And when you get to the cycling bit, you sort of would be the person sitting on the sideline. Whereas you go to a barbecue these days and like every second person is a cyclist or has had a crack at it, because I think ultimately it is a form of exercise that can be sustained well into later life. There's minimal joint impact.
Yes.
So it seems to be something that people can do and keep doing for quite some time. It can be quite social. And there's opportunity also to challenge yourself and compete against yourself, not necessarily having to beat your friend, but just trying to beat your own times and improve your fitness.
And can you explain to our listeners, because some of them might not know, a lot of them probably will, what does cadence refer to in relation to cycling? Yeah,
so cadence is really simply, it's the number of times that you're pedaling each minute. So if I'm pedaling at a cadence of 90 revolutions per minute, it means that I'm moving imagine my right foot, and my right foot was at 12 o'clock, it would return to 12 o'clock 90 times within that minute. So there's different reasons. I know in an Echelon session, we would program specific cadence goals along with power, and there's different reasons for that. So in a really simple sense, riding a lower cadence is helpful for improving your strength or the amount of torque you can generate at the crank. Whereas a higher cadence is helpful for driving your heart rate higher and getting more of a cardiovascular benefit. And I think a big part of, particularly for cyclists looking to improve their performance, is learning about what cadence they can generate the most amount of power in. And it is quite different. So some people seem to be really good at pedaling quickly, and they're little climbers who can fly up the hills quickly. And then you have other people who are perhaps more powerfully built, and they're better in a slightly lower cadence, but they can generate a lot of power that way. Yeah,
and it's really good to be able to experiment with that kind of thing in an indoor studio, I think.
Absolutely. And I think as a road cyclist, you have to have the capacity to quickly change from one to the other as well. So we do a lot of work with like changing cadences from high to low and back again, for that reason, because that's what realistically happens on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Kristin, for any listeners based in Adelaide or cyclists who are planning to come to Adelaide, what's your favourite cycling route here?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I actually rode part of it this morning. So I reckon, and if I had someone over from overseas and was wanting to take them for just a nice tour of Adelaide, I think heading up Norton Summit, over Basket Range, Forest Range, and out to Lobethal, and then perhaps coming back either via the Gorge Road or back through Harndorf it's a really, really nice way to see the Adelaide Hills on roads that are relatively quiet, and we'll really get you to appreciate how good we've got it here, and how close it is. It's literally on our doorstep. So we're very fortunate in that regard.
Oh, it's amazing. And I think because Norton Summit, for example, is so popular with cyclists, that most of the cars that go up and down are pretty used to cyclists there as well. And there's some good cafes along that route too. So
absolutely. Yeah.
It's always a fun part of it. And one other thing I'd love to touch on with you, because I think I read it on your website for your live personal trainers, is that you like routine. And I was thinking, yes, you have 6 people in your household. Without some form of routine, I think it would be totally chaotic. So can you give us some thoughts on routines, how they work for you, how you maintain them, that kind of thing?
Yeah, great. So I guess I'm really interested in this area. I think I am someone who likes to leave nothing on the table. So I'm trying to get as close to a 10 out of 10 as I can in each area of my life. Mm-hmm. So firstly, I think what routine does is it enables you to fit more in if that's your goal. And I guess what it does it for me separates out how you feel from what you do. So I'll give you an example. If I was, say, someone who decided, like, that's it, I need to do some regular exercise. I've been neglecting that part of my life for a while, and I can see that if I keep doing that, it's going to have a negative consequence to my health. So, obviously I'm sitting down thinking about this and then thinking, right, I need to plan out how I'm going to do this. So then what I do is I then start thinking about my week and thinking about, like, when will I be able to exercise, and perhaps establish some blocks of time when I'll exercise. And so what I've got now is I've got a clear reason for exercising, and I've got a clear plan on how that's going to happen.
Yeah. So
then if one of those times was early in the morning and when the alarm clock goes off and I've had a late night the night before, I guess having routines means that I'm more likely just to get up and do it.
Yeah.
But it's not about just being, I guess, mindless and not doing it for a reason. I've actually made that decision at a time gone by when I actually had time to think about it clearly, plan for it. And I'm not going to be derailed by the voice in my head at 5 a.m. that says, but you was a late night last night and you didn't sleep
warm
very
in bed.
well. It's warm in bed and it's cold outside.
Yeah.
All those things that we all face. So I think what routine does is it helps us to follow what we know is the right decision for us that we've made some time ago through planning and logic, and not be derailed by the various emotions that we all experience at times. So I think that for me, that's a really key part to it. So I think generally speaking, I'll set something up, I'll roll it out for a while, go back and review what's working and what's not, make changes, and then push into version 2 of that, which is hopefully new and improved. And I'm probably classic for over budgeting and thinking I can do more than I can. So I've had to learn that lesson the hard way mainly over years, but I think I'm better at it now just through practice.
And I think also having a routine takes that decision-making process out of it. It's set up, you're going to do it. You're not going to have to think.
That's key. And so, for me, explaining to perhaps a new PT client, saying to them, look, really, the only difference between you and I at that time of the morning, neither of us feel like getting out of bed. But I've just pressed that manual override switch millions of times. So it's not even, so for me, the best analogy, which we've got on our website, is I think brushing your teeth is a really good example. So none of us get to the end of the night and go, now, do I feel like brushing my teeth or don't I feel like brushing my teeth? We just do it because we know it's good for us.
Yes.
And I guess the argument I try and make is that exercise should be like that. We should just do it because we know it's good for us. And I think, my sales pitch would be, I think that's where PT and having that support is really, really helpful because you have that sort of, I guess, support to help get you through that and that accountability so that ultimately you get it done in an environment where you've got competing priorities.
And then also, if you've got it done, I think if you say exercise in the morning, it sets you up for a good day because you haven't had that mental battle to deal with.
Absolutely.
First off, you've just done it. So what time do you go to bed then? You have an early start most days.
I'd love to be in bed by 9 every night. It doesn't always happen like that.
No.
But look, I'd probably aim to fall asleep by around 10 if I can.
Yeah, well, that's about the same as me.
Yeah, that works for me. That works for me.
Yeah. Have you read Atomic Habits?
I haven't, no.
Oh, you'd probably really like it. It's basically all about routines and forming habits and how small repetitive changes build up rather than saying, I'm going to, do some huge, massive change and then it doesn't happen. So anyway.
Yeah, I think definitely the psychology around it all is super interesting.
It is.
And I think you learn a lot about yourself through trying, sometimes having some success, sometimes failing. But I think that's part of how we learn. So,
Kristin, who inspires you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. I'm probably not someone that's got this one person, but I think for me, there's a couple of thoughts that I was going to share. So, I think for me, the people that I am inspired by are those who I think they perhaps they've got multiple things that they're trying to do, and they're trying to have a decent crack at all of them. So, for example, perhaps they run a business or they've got a successul career, but what you also know about them is that they also perhaps really value their family, and it's important to them to put time into that, and whether there's health or other aspects of of their life as well. I think so. For me, people having a crack at those things and trying their best to juggle, and sometimes having some wins and sometimes not. I feel more inspired, I think, by those sorts of people perhaps than someone pursuing something where they're just doing one thing.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's wrong, because I've been that person doing one thing before. But I think, perhaps as I've grown older, and maybe it's because of the stage of life I'm at, I'm fortunate to know a few of those people, and have definitely taken some inspiration and also some picked up some pointers from each of those people and how they've done things. It's
great to keep an open mind, isn't it, and keep learning from people around you, I think.
It's the best way. I mean, I know for me, I've been fortunate to have various different mentors, like official and unofficial, in different parts of my life over the years, and I think the consistent trait of all those people are that they are people that I look at and go, in that part of life, you're 78 steps ahead of where I am. And I want to spend time with you to sort of, learn what worked, learn what didn't work, and hopefully they can help me then improve myself in that particular area. So, and I think, I hope that happens until the day I die, because it's also really interesting to learn from those people. Yeah,
it is. And one thing I've discovered through doing this podcast and just generally being the age of 50 that I am, everyone has a story, don't they?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Interesting.
It is.
Yeah. Kristin, the final question that I like to ask all my guests is, if you could recommend 2 things, it doesn't have to be related to cycling, it can be anything, that people could do to improve their well-being, what would they be?
I think wherever you're at, whether you're doing a little or a lot, I think, ensuring that you've got physical activity as part of your life. I think that's really important. So I certainly know some people in situations where they've got families and busy careers, and they don't have a lot of help, so they've got very, very, I think I'm busy, but these people are seriously busy and have very little time to themselves, and their options to exercise in a formal sense are pretty slim. So I think just being able to incorporate some form of movement in their lives, just because I think it's very easy to probably just to put the whole thing down and think I'll get back to it later, but a small amount goes a long way. And it's a bit like the person trying to get in 3 walks a week. It's far harder to go from not walking at all to establishing 3 5-minute walks than it is to turn those 3 5-minute walks into 3 1-hour walks. The hardest part's finding the footprint. So I think that's number 1. And I think, number 2 would be just being intentional. So again, I think a common thing that I would get is if you spoke to most people and you said to them, if you think about wellbeing and health, like where would that sit in your priorities? I think most of us would like to think that was in our top 2 or 3 priorities.
Yeah, for sure.
But more often than not, our diaries don't reflect that. So I think making sure that we actually do allocate time for our health and treating it with the same degree of seriousness that we would treat our career or our finances or issues with the family. Having movement or exercise at that same sort of level. And if I can do a naughty third tip, I've just thought of it on the fly. I think the other thing is looking at movement as an opportunity, not an inconvenience.
Yeah, sure.
It sounds like a cliche, but if you think about the classic situation where, you're driving into town for a meeting somewhere, and what do? We all try and find the closest park to the door we've got to walk into the building. We all do it. Guilty as charged. So rather than thinking of it like that, it's not necessarily that you have to deliberately find a park far away. You could do. But if you did get a park far away, be grateful for that and think about this is an opportunity to move.
Absolutely.
Which is good for me. And it's not a waste of time. So I think that can flip things as well.
Yeah, so it's not, a hassle, I have to walk a bit further.
Correct.
It's like, great.
Yeah, that's
I get to have a bit of a walk before the meeting.
That's right.
Yeah. I think what you said before is really insightful about, creating time for health and well-being, because I think particularly busy parents do tend to often put themselves last.
Yes.
So if you carve out the time, that's good for everyone. It's good for your family as well.
I agree. And I think, as parents, I find parenting and management very similar. So it's all about what you do, not what you say. So, the leadership component is really important. So I know for me, like, what I'd want from my kids is that they had a love of exercise, and I'm not fussed if they're particularly good at it or elite or fast, but just that it's something that they can enjoy doing, because I know that will be good for their health, and they'll form some good friendships through doing that. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
Well, I'm sure they're getting the right example from you and Tanya. So if someone wants to visit one of your gyms, Live PT, or have a go at Echelon Cycling, what's the best way for them to do that? Yeah,
sure. So both of our websites, livept.com.au and echeloncycling.com.au are probably the best ways. So they've both got contact pages on there, and those contact pages, those contact requests come directly to me. So I'll respond to you, and then can answer your questions and get you started if that's what you'd like to do.
Brilliant. And I'll put links to that in the show notes, and I can certainly vouch that that's true, because when I went onto the contact page at Echelon, you rang me straight away.
Oh, good.
So, Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you today, Kristin.
Thanks for having me.
And that was Kristin Lewis, former Australian national road cyclist, owner of Life Personal Trainers, Echelon Cycling Studio, and father of 4 daughters, talking all things fitness, cycling and routine. So thank you very much for listening today, and I hope you found today's interview interesting and inspiring. If you did, please share the podcast and tell your friends about it. And if you could take a minute to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, it will help people find my podcasts. If you would like to subscribe to Vibrant Lives podcast, you can subscribe on all good podcast providers like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Please follow me on Instagram at vibrant_lives_podcast and DM me if there's any people you'd like me to interview or topics you'd like to learn about, and I will try and deliver that to you. I'm always so grateful for any support of my podcast, and the best way you can do that is to spread the word. So thank you very much for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.